The film began in Istanbul, Turkey, where MI6 agent James Bond and his partner, Eve Moneypenny, were on a critical mission. At a safe house, Bond discovered fellow agent Ronson, who was gravely wounded from a gunshot. A crucial hard drive containing the identities of all NATO agents working undercover in various terrorist organizations had been stolen. This information was highly classified and in the wrong hands could have compromised countless lives. Bond tried to stop Ronson's bleeding, but time was not on his side. Moneypenny urged him to pursue the thief immediately. After applying an emergency bandage, Bond left Ronson and jumped into a car with Moneypenny to begin the chase. The perpetrator, a French mercenary named Patrice, escaped in a black Audi. During the high-speed pursuit, they received directions from Tanner at MI6 headquarters via satellite link. Tanner informed them that a medical team had been dispatched to save Ronson, though his chances of survival were slim. Tensions escalated. Bond took the wheel, deliberately crashing their car into Patrice's vehicle, which sent the enemy car tumbling and created chaos on the streets of Istanbul. Patrice, emerging from the wreckage, opened fire indiscriminately at the officers blocking his path before stealing a police car. Unfazed, Bond commandeered a motorbike and continued the chase through narrow alleys, past shops, and even across the rooftops of the Grand Bazaar, Istanbul's oldest and busiest market. Back at headquarters, their superior, M, oversaw the operation. She emphasized that the list of agent identities had not to fall into enemy hands, as it was a matter of life and death. Meanwhile, Moneypenny continued the pursuit in her car, guided by Tanner's satellite and CCTV surveillance. Following Tanner's directions, she took an alternate route and managed to cut off Patrice's path. Under pressure, Patrice leaped onto a moving freight train. Without hesitation, Bond jumped onto the train as well, and the fight continued on the fast-moving carriages. Moneypenny reported to M that Bond and Patrice were now fighting on top of the train, not inside it. Though surprised, M ordered them to continue the pursuit. On the train, Bond climbed onto an excavator on one of the carriages to get closer to Patrice. It was then that he was shot in the shoulder, but he pushed on. Patrice uncoupled the carriages to slow Bond down, but Bond made a daring jump to the next carriage. When asked about his condition, he coolly replied that he had just changed carriages. The close-quarters combat intensified on the speeding train. Moneypenny realized she could not chase them any further. She tried to find a clear shot to stop Patrice, but her position was precarious. The risk of missing and hitting Bond was too great. The train was moments away from entering a tunnel, and their window of opportunity was closing fast. M, understanding the critical nature of the situation, gave a firm order to Moneypenny to take the shot, despite knowing the immense risks. Full of doubt, Moneypenny finally fired. The shot hit Bond. His body was thrown from the top of the train and plunged into the rushing river below. With a trembling voice, Moneypenny reported that the agent had been shot. The MI6 control room fell into a stunned silence. Patrice managed to escape with the hard drive containing the list of secret agents, and Bond was officially declared missing and presumed dead. 3 months after the incident in Turkey, M and Tanner were summoned to an urgent meeting with Gareth Mallory, the chairman of the Parliamentary Intelligence and Security Committee, and a former SAS officer. The atmosphere in the room was tense. Mallory alluded to the disastrous loss of the hard drive, calling it a major failure for MI6. He asked M if she had considered withdrawing all agents from the field. M replied that all options had been considered, but Mallory felt her response was a denial. He then informed M that the government was proposing her retirement in 2 months, emphasizing that it was not a dismissal, but a graceful end to her term. As a reward for her service, she would be given an honorary title. M, however, refused to retire during a crisis, stressing that she would not abandon MI6 while her agency was in danger. As M and Tanner were on their way back to base, Tanner received an alert that someone was trying to hack into the stolen hard drive. The signal was traced to a location within London, and more specifically from inside MI6. M immediately ordered them to return to headquarters. When they tried to sever the connection, the data instead was rerouted back into MI6's internal system. The signal, surprisingly, originated from M's own computer. On Tanner's screen, a message appeared with M's face on it, accompanied by the words, "Think on your sins." Just as the panic set in, M's car was suddenly halted by police officers. M and Tanner got out to investigate. Before they could realize what was happening, a massive explosion rocked MI6 headquarters. They watched in horror, fully aware that their agency had just been attacked from within. 6 MI6 staff members were killed as a result of the bombing. At their funeral, M, consumed by grief and anger, vowed to find out who was behind the brutal attack. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Bond was still alive. He had deliberately used his presumed death to disappear and enjoy a quiet retirement. While relaxing in a remote location, he saw a news report on television detailing the explosion at MI6 headquarters. The attack was being classified as an act of terrorism targeting the heart of British intelligence. The report stated that 6 people had been killed and many more were injured, with no identified suspects so far. This information shook Bond, and he knew his time to return had come. He traveled back to London and waited for M at her house. When M arrived and entered, she was shocked to see Bond still alive. He admitted that he had taken advantage of his presumed death to enjoy a quiet retirement, but he was now back and ready to work. Tension rose when Bond brought up M's decision to have Moneypenny shoot him. M defended herself, calling it a difficult decision made for the sake of the mission and the lives of the other agents. Despite feeling betrayed, Bond realized that MI6 was under attack and that he was needed. He stated that he was ready to return. M explained that he would have to undergo a series of tests to prove his eligibility as an active agent. Before he left, she told Bond that his apartment had been sold and his belongings were being held in storage. She replied that this was standard procedure for single agents who were presumed dead. She also stressed that Bond could not stay at her house, and Bond decided to look for a hotel. The next day, Bond and Tanner went to the new MI6 headquarters, which had been moved to an old underground bunker from the Churchill era. Tanner explained that the previous attacks were very sophisticated. The perpetrators had hacked the building's systems, activated the gas, and stolen all the confidential files. They even knew M's schedule and the exact time she left the building. Bond concluded that the goal was not to kill, but rather to send a message of intimidation. MI6's new headquarters was on an ancient 18th century route and now served as a temporary operations center. Tanner revealed that Britain was being attacked via cyberspace. Bond was to meet M and Mallory, the chairman of the Intelligence Security Committee, the next day. Bond then underwent hours of intensive physical training, which included running, push-ups, shooting practice, and various other fitness tests. During the training, Tanner reported that the signal from the stolen hard drive was difficult to track because it was being routed through thousands of global servers. Now that the enemy had M's access code, it was only a matter of time before the agent list was revealed. Tanner suspected that the perpetrator was someone from M's past, perhaps from her time on duty in Hong Kong, but there was no strong evidence yet. Bond then underwent a psychological test using word association. His answers reflected his mental state, which was full of trauma and anger. When the word Skyfall was mentioned, Bond fell silent and ended the session with one word: done. From behind the glass, M, Tanner, and Mallory watched the process closely. Mallory concluded that the process had gone well. After the training, Bond went to the bathroom and calmly removed the bullet fragments that had been embedded in his shoulder for 3 months since the shooting incident on the train. He then handed over the bullet fragments to the Weapons Analysis Division to check the type of ammunition used. The analysis results were immediately given to M. In the morning, Bond, who was waiting for Tanner, met Moneypenny. They exchanged tense words about the shooting incident in Istanbul. With regret, Moneypenny apologized. Bond, however, responded casually, saying that only 4 of his ribs had been cracked and no vital organs were affected. Moneypenny explained that she had been temporarily removed from field duties and was now assisting Mallory in the transition period. She hoped to one day return to the field. Bond asked her to tell him in advance if that happened. Tanner soon arrived and invited Bond to meet with him. Before entering, Bond teased Moneypenny to keep moving so it would be harder to shoot, a subtle joke about the shot that missed in Istanbul. In M's office, which was damaged by the explosion, Bond noticed the only thing that was still intact. It was a ceramic dog statue. He quipped that the object had survived, to which M replied with a sarcastic comment about his taste in decorations. Shortly afterward, Mallory entered the room. He introduced himself as the chairman of the Intelligence and Security Committee and said the Prime Minister was directly involved in handling the crisis. M then informed him that Bond had passed his tests and was back on duty. However, Mallory questioned Bond's decision, asking why he didn't choose to stay dead and enjoy a quiet life, a rare escape for an agent. Bond responded by asking if Mallory had ever served in the field. Mallory replied that one did not need to be a field agent to understand that the world of espionage was a game for the young. He expressed doubt about Bond's physical condition and abilities after the serious injuries he had suffered. Bond answered firmly that it did not matter to him whether he was fired or sent on duty. M defended Bond, stating that if Bond said he was ready, then he was ready. When Mallory accused M of being sentimental, She replied that as long as she led the department, she would determine who the agents would be. Mallory eventually accepted the decision, but warned Bond not to be careless. After Mallory left, Tanner showed Bond the analysis results of the bullet fragments that had been lodged in his shoulder. The results were surprising. The bullets were made of military-grade depleted uranium, a material that was expensive, rare, and used only by certain parties, including Patrice. Tanner identified Patrice as a mysterious hitman who had no official identification and was currently being hunted by the CIA for his involvement in the assassination of the Yemeni ambassador. Intelligence information indicated that Patrice would be in Shanghai in 2 days for his next mission. M immediately ordered Bond to go to Shanghai, observe Patrice's movements, find out who had hired him, and, most importantly, avenge Agent Ronson's death. Bond nodded and answered firmly, "With pleasure." As Bond left, Tanner asked M, surprised if Bond had passed the test. M replied that he didn't. Bond then went to a painting exhibition. There he sat pensively in front of a painting of an old broken ship. A young man approached him and struck up a conversation. It turned out he was the new section chief, Q. Bond, who initially underestimated him because of his young age, quipped that he looked more like an apprentice technician than a tool expert. But Q confidently replied that age was not a measure of ability, claiming he could do more damage with a laptop than Bond could in the field in a year. He explained that even though the world was changing, there was still a need for someone who could pull the trigger or decide not to. Q then handed over Bond's equipment. They were plane tickets to Shanghai, documents, a passport, a 9mm short Walther pistol with a microdermal scanner system that could only be used by Bond, and a standard radio transmitter for emergency signals. Bond quipped that the equipment was very simple this time, just a pistol and a radio. Q replied sarcastically that they didn't vibe with the explosive pen anymore. Before parting, Q wished Bond success on his mission and reminded him to return all the equipment intact. Bond arrived in Shanghai and immediately started his mission, discreetly following Patrice from the airport to a skyscraper. As Patrice took the elevator to the top floor, Bond clung to the bottom of the elevator car. Upstairs, Patrice exited the elevator and went to a room with large windows. He set up his sniper rifle and took a shot, killing a man who was sitting in front of a painting in the building across the street. As soon as the shot was fired, Bond attacked. A brutal fight ensued in the dark room, illuminated only by the colorful neon lights of the city outside. When Bond finally cornered Patrice and nearly had him dangling from the top floor, he caught his hand and tried to question him about who was behind the stolen list of MI6 agents. Patrice remained silent, choosing instead to let go of Bond's grip, falling to his death. From a distance, Bond noticed a mysterious woman watching the incident from a window in the building opposite. She was Severine. Bond checked Patrice's belongings and found a casino chip that indicated a destination in Macau. At the same time, M received a message from the hacker, revealing that the agent list was being decrypted. The first 5 names had already been announced online, with 5 new names to follow every week. The message also included a personal taunt to M, think of your sins. M immediately contacted Tanner and ordered him to withdraw all the agents whose identities had been exposed for their safety. A few days later, Bond arrived in Macau. Moneypenny came to his room to deliver an urgent message. Bond was surprised, having not ordered room service, but Moneypenny replied that she was delivering an urgent message from M. She explained that the first 5 agents' names had been published online and that this would continue weekly, a sadistic game, as Bond called it. As Moneypenny shaved Bond with a traditional razor, they shared playful banter. Bond praised the old methods, which he said were still effective, and also expressed his doubts about Mallory. Moneypenny explained that Mallory had a strong military background. Bond then continued his mission at a luxurious casino in Macau, following the directions from Patrice's chip. There, Moneypenny disguised herself in the crowd and stayed in communication with Bond via a hidden earpiece. She warned him not to touch his ear and gave him information about the 3 exits and the many dark corners in the room. They had a chance to joke with each other, with Bond complimenting her dress and Moneypenny quipping about the extra arms. When asked if he liked to gamble, Bond replied that he didn't like to take risks. Bond exchanged his chip at the cashier and was given a suitcase containing the money plus a bonus. His gaze then fell on the elegant woman he had seen in Shanghai, Severine. He approached her and they spoke. Severine told him that she had been waiting for whoever came to exchange the chip. They then formally introduced themselves. The conversation between Bond and Severine grew more serious. Bond removed his earpiece and gave it to Moneypenny to ensure their conversation was not being monitored. Severine asked about Patrice, and Bond replied that he had killed him so he could meet the killer's superior. Severine warned him that what he was about to do was extremely dangerous. Realizing her fear, Bond pointed out that the three men guarding her were not protectors, but watchdogs. He also recognized the tattoo on her hand, a symbol of her past as an entertainer in Macau. He concluded that Severine had come from a dark world that she wanted to leave behind. Severine denied that Bond knew anything, but Bond insisted that he understood fear and wanted to help her. Severine finally agreed on one condition: Bond had to kill the man who controlled her life. Before leaving, she warned that when he left the casino, her guards would kill Bond. But if he survived, he could meet her on the Chimera ship at North Port of Moorings No. 7, which was scheduled to depart in 1 hour. She then looked at Bond, saying she was happy to meet him and wished him good luck. As Bond tried to leave the casino, 3 of Severine's bodyguards stopped him, and a fierce battle ensued. Bond was pushed and fell to a lower floor, an exotic performance arena with giant Komodo dragons. One of the guards aimed at Bond, but a Komodo dragon suddenly attacked the man from behind and bit him to death. Bond took advantage of the chaos to get back upstairs. Moneypenny appeared and helped him. Before they parted, Bond handed her a suitcase containing 4 million euros and then immediately left to catch up with Severine. Meanwhile, Severine waited for Bond at the dock, but he never came, and the Chimera ship departed without him. Aboard the ship, Severine went to her cabin to freshen up. Suddenly, Bond appeared from the shadows and approached her. Bond teased Severine, saying he preferred to see her without her dress. The two then fell into an intimate relationship before facing the danger ahead. At the same time, M, Mallory, and Tanner watched a news broadcast about the public execution video of Captain Hussein, an MI6 agent. Hussein was one of the 5 agents killed in what was being called the biggest security breach in British history. The Prime Minister defended MI6, but the opposition began to attack. Mallory turned off the television and condemned the war as incomprehensible and impossible to win. M rejected the politicization of the situation, confirming that 3 of her agents were dead. Mallory informed her that the Prime Minister had ordered an investigation and that M must be present. M criticized the decision as a form of insult in broad daylight. Mallory emphasized the importance of transparency in a democratic country. M was certain that their enemy came from within, someone who knew the system from the shadow world, the same place as Bond. The next morning, Bond and Severine sailed to a remote, long-abandoned island off the coast of Macau. However, upon arrival, they were immediately arrested by men working for Severine's superior. Their hands were tied and they were taken to the island, a former city that had been evacuated after a mass panic created through digital manipulation. Severine explained that her superior, a former MI6 agent named Silva, took control of the island by spreading false information about a chemical plant leak, causing the entire population to abandon it overnight. She warned Bond about the danger they were facing. After apologizing, she was taken away. Bond was then taken to Silva, who greeted him with an allegorical story about rats trapped in a drum who ate each other until only 2 were left. He equated himself and Bond to the last 2 rats, products of a cruel and manipulative system. In a dialogue full of sarcasm and psychological pressure, Silva revealed that he had once been M's most trusted agent, but then dealt betrayed. He also showed Bond a detailed psychological evaluation that declared Bond unfit for duty, and yet M had still sent him, as if Bond were just a pawn to be sacrificed. The peak of Silva's cruelty occurred when he brought Bond to Severine, who was now tied up and had a bruised face. Silva placed a glass of scotch on Severine's head and challenged Bond to shoot it. Bond intentionally missed. Silva then took over, shooting Severine straight in the head, killing her for her betrayal. Bond simply quipped that it was a waste of good scotch before suddenly attacking and incapacitating Silva's men. As Bond pointed his gun at Silva, the man sneered, challenging him, asking what Bond could do alone. Without answering, Bond showed him a small radio, a device that quietly emitted an emergency signal. Moments later, MI6 helicopters appeared and surrounded the scene. Silva was stunned and was finally arrested and taken back to England. Upon arrival at MI6's temporary headquarters, M, Bond, and Tanner met Silva in a holding room. In a tense meeting, Silva greeted M with bitter sarcasm, bringing up his past as her most trusted MI6 agent. He accused M of betraying him, describing how he was tortured for 5 months without air and still kept state and M's secrets. He said that this suffering had made him realize that it was M's betrayal that had truly destroyed him. Silva admitted to having tried to end his life with a cyanide capsule hidden in his teeth, but the poison only burned his internal organs without killing him, leaving him with permanent scars. He claimed the only reason he survived was to look M in the eye one more time. M remained cool and professional, stating that Silva would be transferred to Belmarsh prison and tried. When Silva insisted that his real name, Tiago Rodriguez, be used, M refused, stating that Silva's past would soon be erased along with his future. After that, M ordered Bond to meet Q and investigate the contents of Silva's computer to determine whether the list of agent identities had been leaked. Before Bond left, M explained that Silva used to be a talented agent in Hong Kong, but had illegally broken into the Chinese network. In order to save the other 6 agents, M was forced to hand Silva over to the Chinese. The decision saved many lives but left a deep mark on Silva's heart. Tanner reminded M that the parliamentary session was due to begin in 30 minutes, but for M, cracking the contents of Silva's computer remained a top priority. Q tried to decrypt Silva's computer. He discovered that the system was equipped with high-level protection, including a file storage protocol that would automatically erase all memory if forced into operation. Q stated that there were only 6 people in the world capable of creating such a complex system, and he was one of them. With confidence, Q opened the system and found what was known as the Omega Site, the deepest part of the system with advanced encryption. The codes inside were polymorphic, meaning they could change shape every time a hacking attempt was made, making it like a Rubik's Cube that resisted being solved. When Bond saw the suspicious data that said Granborough Road, he realized that it was a clue. The long-closed underground station was likely part of Silva's escape plan. After Bond entered that name as a key, the system displayed a map of London's underground lines, confirming that the data was not random, but an escape route. Suddenly, a message flashed on Q's screen. MI6's own systems were now being accessed by Silva's computer. Q realized they had walked into a trap. Silva had infiltrated and hacked the MI6 system from within. Realizing the danger, Bond rushed to the holding room, but Silva had already escaped. With Q's tracking assistance, Bond immediately went to the subway to chase Silva through underground corridors, past service doors, and down deserted tunnels. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment escape. Silva had planned everything, intending for MI6 to open their computer so he could use it to launch his full-scale attack on the agency. On the train tracks, Bond came to a locked service door as the sound of an approaching train grew louder. In a desperate situation, he managed to break down the door just in time and continued the chase in the underground passage. He arrived at a busy station during rush hour, surrounded by a crowd of passengers. Q had difficulty tracking Silva until he finally found him, disguised as a police officer. Q immediately ordered Bond to get on the train, which was already moving. Bond chased it, jumped, and managed to get inside after an officer opened the door. On the train, Bond realized the route was leading to the location of the parliamentary session. He immediately ordered Q to contact Tanner and secure M before Silva arrived. Upon arriving at the next station, Bond saw Silva get off the train and immediately chased after him. They faced off in the underground passage, and Bond finally caught up with Silva. However, Silva mocked him and showed him an explosive device he had disguised as a radio. Suddenly, a massive explosion erupted at their location. Seconds later, a train crashed into the destroyed section of the tunnel, nearly hitting Bond. Silva escaped in the chaos and was picked up by a police car to continue his mission to Parliament. Meanwhile, as Bond was pursuing Silva, M, accompanied by Tanner, was at a hearing with the Ministry of Defense Intelligence and members of the House of Lords. The hearing was opened by the minister, who questioned MI6's competence in handling the national security crisis following the data leak and agent deaths. M calmly explained that steps had been taken and that the responsible party had been arrested. However, the minister continued to pressure M, arguing that the failure showed the incompetence of her institution. In the midst of the argument, Tanner received news from Q that Silva had escaped and that Bond was chasing him. Tanner discreetly informed M, but she refused to be evacuated, choosing to continue her testimony. The minister continued to criticize M until Mallory interrupted, asking that M be given the opportunity to make a direct statement. Once permitted, M delivered an emotional speech. She revealed that the world now faced enemies who were no longer tied to countries or ideologies, but were individuals who moved in the shadows. She questioned whether the public truly felt safe and emphasized the importance of having agents like those in the 00 Division, her division. Silva, who had infiltrated the Parliament building, overpowered several guards and approached the courtroom. At the same time, M, still speaking before the forum, was quoting a poem about courage and an unyielding spirit. Just as she finished, Silva burst in and caused chaos. He pointed his gun at M, but before he could shoot, Mallory pulled her away, taking the bullet instead. A chaotic shootout erupted in the courtroom. Bond, who arrived shortly after, also fired at Silva. He then threw his gun to Moneypenny so she could help manage the situation. Mallory, despite his injury, grabbed a gun from a downed officer and began to shoot as well. In the tense situation, Bond shot the gas canisters in the room. A small explosion and thick smoke filled the room, obscuring Silva's vision and giving them a chance to move. Silva eventually escaped the Parliament building. While Moneypenny evacuated everyone from the courtroom, Bond pursued Silva. He picked up M in a car, which surprised her. Bond explained that they had to take the game to the next level, stop following Silva's lead, and make Silva chase them instead. Though initially hesitant, M agreed to Bond's plan, but insisted that no one else be involved. Bond immediately contacted Q, asking for help in creating a false trail, a scheme so they could disappear from all tracking systems except for Silva's. Q realized this was an unofficial mission, but agreed to help. Since all of MI6's cars were fitted with trackers, Bond traded their vehicle for his personal Aston Martin DB5. M criticized the classic vehicle, calling it flashy and uncomfortable, but Bond drove it to his childhood home in Scotland, Skyfall. He explained that this location gave them a significant advantage, as he knew every corner of the estate while Silva did not. Meanwhile, at MI6 headquarters, Q and Tanner monitored Bond's movements. They created false signals to lead Silva along a specific path. Q explained that the trap had to be precise. If it was too faint, Silva would not see it, and if it was too obvious, he would know it was a trap. Mallory came in and overheard their plan, but instead of stopping them, he fully supported the strategy. He ordered Bond to be directed via the A9 route, a direct road that could be monitored by traffic cameras. When Q expressed concern about the Prime Minister's reaction, Mallory coldly replied that they need not worry and ordered them to continue. Bond and M had disappeared, bringing the game to an area they controlled, and MI6 arranged for Silva to be led in their desired direction. After a long night's journey, Bond and M arrived at Skyfall. Bond's childhood home was old, but still stood strong in the Scottish Highlands. They were greeted by Kincaid, the Bond family's old groundskeeper, who was surprised but relieved to see Bond alive. After Bond explained that they were being hunted, Kincaid unhesitatingly offered his help, despite Bond's warning that this was not his fight. They began checking the available supplies. Most of the weapons had been sold after Bond's family presumed him dead, except for an antique rifle belonging to Bond's father and some old dynamite in the horse stable. Despite their limited resources, they were determined to survive. Bond and Kincaid tested the rifle outside the house, reminiscing about Bond's childhood. Kincaid then showed them a secret passageway to the chapel that was once used as an escape route. It was the same place where a young Bond had hidden for 2 days after the death of his parents. With limited time and resources, they prepared the house for battle, boarding up windows, setting booby traps, and assembling explosives. As night fell, M blamed herself for everything that had happened. However, Bond reassured her that she was only doing her job. Their conversation was interrupted by a light in the distance, a sign that the enemy had arrived. Kincaid, the groundskeeper, declared that he was ready, having been so even before Bond was born. The battle began. Bond, who was hiding on top of a car, opened fire first. Kincaid shot from inside the house, while M set off the explosive traps they had prepared. The fight was brutal, and some of Silva's men managed to get into the house. When one of them shot at M, Bond intervened, killing the attacker. M suffered a minor injury and admitted she was not a skilled shooter. Silva soon arrived in a helicopter carrying more men and heavy weapons. Seeing their critical situation, Bond quickly devised a new strategy. He ordered Kincaid and M to take cover in the kitchen, while he attempted to hold them off from outside. Bond fired at the helicopter, but the enemy responded with a hail of gunfire. Realizing they were completely outmatched, Bond instructed Kincaid and M to escape through the secret passage to the chapel, their final refuge. Bond stayed behind to face the attack. The house was hit by gunfire and explosions, but Bond managed to escape. An increasingly aggressive Silva ordered his men to burn the house down and blow up Bond's Aston Martin. In the chaos, Bond set up a propane gas cylinder as a large trap and then went down the secret passage as planned. Shortly after, a massive explosion destroyed the house in Silva's helicopter, killing most of his men. From a distance, Kincaid and M watched the flames light up the night sky. Silva, who survived, saw the light from Kincaid's torch and followed it. Before Silva could reach the chapel, Bond chased him to the frozen lake. There he was held at gunpoint by Silva's man. In a tense situation, Silva expressed his exhaustion with the chaos he had caused and ordered his man to shoot Bond. But Bond reacted quickly, shooting the ice under their feet until it broke. They both fell into the freezing water, and in the fight below the water, Bond managed to strangle his enemy to death. Meanwhile, Silva arrived at the chapel where M and Kincaid were hiding. He calmly entered, stating that everything had to end there. When Kincaid appeared, Silva shot at him, but missed, then pointed his gun at Kincaid. Silva approached M, realizing she had been badly injured. He showed a disturbing emotion that seemed full of despair. In a soft yet urgent voice, he invited M to end everything together. He pressed his temple to her head and directed his own hand to press the trigger, begging M to free them both with the same bullet. In a state of mental breakdown, Silva saw death as the only release. But before the trigger could be pulled, Bond suddenly appeared and threw a knife at Silva's back. The weapon was stuck right in his body. Silva could only let out a soft scream before finally falling and dying. Bond immediately hugged the dying M. In a soft voice, M asked why he had taken so long. Bond replied briefly, trying to calm her down. Realizing there was no more time, she said that she had done one thing right. She had chosen Bond. She died in his arms as the night passed in silence. After M's funeral, Bond stood alone on the roof of the new NY6 headquarters, looking out at the city. Moneypenny approached him and admitted that she did not expect to see him there often. Just as Bond thought she would return to the field, Moneypenny explained that she had chosen to step down after the shooting incident in Istanbul. She then gave Bond a porcelain dog statue, a legacy from M, that had been specified in her will. Bond saw the object as a message to continue his work in the field, not from behind a desk. He thanked her. They went down to the new office, which now belonged to Mallory, who had been promoted to the position of M. There, Bond and Moneypenny officially introduced themselves. Tanner greeted them and said that M wanted to see Bond. Bond went in and asked about Mallory's injured arm. Mallory replied that his condition was getting better, and then immediately said that there was still a lot of work to be done and asked if Bond was ready. Bond replied confidently that he was ready.